Sehr geehrter Herr Botschafter Heusgen, meine Damen und Herren.
Heusgen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm certain I speak on behalf of everyone when, after this speech of President Zelensky, I first of all respond to him. Volodymyr, we would have loved to have you with us today because Ukraine belongs here, at our side, in a free and united Europe. However, we understand where your place has to be at this time, has to be, in Kiev, working tirelessly for your country. And for that, we here in Munich wish you continued strength and confidence.
Extend a very special, very warm welcome to the Vice President of the United States. Thank you for joining the conference once again, I may add. It is an honor to have you here with us, along with so many colleagues from the US Senate, the House of Representatives and the administration. Welcome to all of you to Munich. Ihnen, lieber Herr Ischinger, war es immer ein Anliegen, dass
Mr. Ischinger, it was always important to you to ensure that this conference was not just about giving speeches, but that the participants entered into a dialogue with each other. And Mr. Heusgen, I know that you set great store by that too. So I'd therefore like to confine myself to a few points to, as it were, kick off our discussion. First of all, Putin's revisionism will not prevail. On the contrary, Ukraine is more united than ever. The EU stands unified, and it stands behind Ukraine's future EU membership. NATO is growing. It is gaining new members. And at the same time, thousands of young Russians have paid the ultimate price for Putin's war with their lives, and many others have turned their backs on their country. The Ukrainians are defending their freedom at such high cost and with remarkably impressive resolve. And we are supporting them as comprehensively and as long as is necessary. Germany alone provided more than 12 billion euro to assist Ukraine last year. We've taken in more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees, granting them full access to our labor market, to our schools, to our universities. We're supplying state-of-the-art weaponry, ammunition, and other military goods, more than any other country in continental Europe. That not only meets the, and it has to be said, justified expectations of our partners and allies, we're also assuming the responsibility which a country of Germany's size, location, and economic clout has to shoulder in times such as these. In so doing, we have broken with decades-long principles of German policy. For example, the maxim that we don't supply weapons in a war such as this and in an area such as this. I understand if some people here in Germany are concerned and question our decisions, and I want to say to them that it's not our arms supplies which are prolonging the war. The opposite is true. And that brings me to my second point. The sooner President Putin realizes that he cannot achieve his imperialist objective, the greater the chance that the war will end soon with the withdrawal of Russia's occupying forces. That's also Ukraine's aim, as President Zelensky emphasized at our meetings last week in Paris and Brussels, and he's just reaffirmed it once more just now. We, Europe, as well as the transatlantic and international communities, are firmly united in pursuit of this goal. By the way, this includes documenting and prosecuting war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Russians in Ukraine. It's good that the Munich Security Conference is addressing this issue, for there can be no lasting peace without justice. At the same time, we're making sure that war doesn't break out between NATO and Russia. My third message is therefore, We will continue to strike a balance between providing the best possible support for Ukraine and avoiding an unintended escalation. And I'm pleased and grateful that President Biden and many other allies share this view. After all, the path we've embarked upon together runs through uncharted territory. For the first time in our history, a nuclear power is waging an imperialist war of aggression here on European soil, and there's no blueprint for that, for what we need to do in such a situation. I believe we would do well to carefully weigh up all the consequences of our actions and closely coordinate all key steps among the allies. For this is a war in our neighborhood, in Europe, a dangerous war. And despite all the pressure to take action, and that undoubtedly exists, in this key question, caution must take priority over hasty decisions and unity over going it alone, over solo actions. And from the outset, we have to provide our support in such a way that it can be continued for a prolonged period. To date, any decision we've made on supplying new weapon systems has been taken on that premise, in the case of howitzers and multiple launch rocket systems, in the case of air defense weapons, armored infantry fighting vehicles, Patriot missile batteries, and most recently, Western battle tanks. And we will continue to decide on that basis in future. That also means that all those who can supply battle tanks of this kind should now actually do so. Defense Minister Pistorius, Foreign Minister Baerbock, and myself are canvassing intensively for this, and we will do so again here in Munich. Germany will do everything it can to make this decision easier for our partners, for instance, by training Ukrainian soldiers here in Germany or providing support in terms of supplies and logistics. By the way, I see this as an example of the kind of leadership which everyone is entitled to expect from Germany, and I expressly offer it to our friends and partners. And that brings me to my fourth message. Germany is committed to living up to its responsibility for Europe's security and that of NATO allied territory without any ifs or buts. In previous years, it has often been said from this platform that Germany has to live up to its responsibility in the security policy sphere, and I share this view. I not only share it, we will indeed fulfill our responsibility by providing an additional brigade to protect Lithuania, by assisting Poland and Slovakia with air defense and air policing, by protecting critical infrastructure in the North and Baltic Seas, and by leading NATO's Very High Readiness Joint Task Force and keeping 17,000 troops on standby to that end. In order to accomplish that and more in the future, we are putting an end to the neglect of the Bundeswehr. We've laid the foundation for this by creating the special fund of 100 billion euro for our armed forces. To realize this, we amended the Basic Law with the support of our country's largest opposition party. This fund allows us to finally change gear in terms of building up our Bundeswehr's capabilities. Of course, the new combat aircraft, helicopters, ships and tanks will result in an increase in expenditure on ammunition, equipment, maintenance, exercises, training and personnel. And I therefore want to take this opportunity to reaffirm what I said in the Bundestag 3 days after the war began. Germany will increase its defense expenditure to 2% of gross domestic product on a permanent basis. In order to invest this funding in a meaningful and sustainable manner, we need a high-performing, competitive arms industry in Germany and in Europe as a whole. Therefore, my fifth point is the European Union must pull together strategically when it comes to arms policy. We must all work in the same direction. We're developing the future combat air system together with France and Spain, and the main ground combat system with France. And we're also making progress in the joint development of European capabilities. One example of this is the European Sky Shield initiative proposed by Germany, which is intended to strengthen Europe's air defense within the NATO framework. These are steps towards a Europe of defense and armament, as I outlined last year at Charles University in Prague. They are also steps towards a Europe more capable of taking action in geopolitical terms, towards a Europe which is also stronger and as an ally in the transatlantic alliance. That also means doing more to resolve conflicts in our neighborhood. This is the purpose of the European proposal initiated by President Macron and myself on an agreement between Serbia and Kosovo. And I hope that Belgrade and Pristina will grasp this historic opportunity in the interest of stability in the Western Balkans and throughout Europe. Further steps must be taken to consolidate a geopolitical Europe. After all, security cannot be achieved through military strength alone in our digital, technological, and globalized world. And that's why my sixth point is, for us Europeans, and I'm ultimately talking about all open and democratic societies like our own, it's absolutely crucial that we become more resilient overall. That will not be achieved by deglobalization, not by turning our backs on the world. That would indeed be a betrayal of our own values, as well as an ill-advised decision economically. Rather, it can only be achieved by ending one-sided, risky dependencies and making our political and economic relations broader and more robust. We Germans know what we're talking about. After all, we in Germany ended our dependency on Russian energy during the course of the last 12 months. That required a huge effort. We will reduce such critical dependencies in other areas too, for example, with regard to strategically important raw materials or cutting-edge technologies. Incidentally, I believe this goal, too, should be included in our new national security strategy. We're already strengthening our own production capacities, for example, for semiconductors. We're already diversifying our supply chains and gaining new supplies and markets in the Asia-Pacific region, in Africa, in Central and South America. At the same time, this is also always about granting these regions a greater political say. Indeed, it's about demanding this say. For it's also in their interest that fundamental principles of our peaceful order and of the UN Charter are not trampled underfoot. By the way, that was one of the reasons I traveled to Beijing last autumn. All countries are called upon to defend certain fundamental principles of the international order, including China. And I'm glad that President Xi made it clear on that occasion that he is firmly opposed to any threat to deploy nuclear weapons, and most certainly to their actual deployment in Russia's war against Ukraine. At the same time, and under no illusions about what we can achieve through dialogue alone, also among our democratic partners in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Europa muss aus der Vorstellung herauskommen, dass die Probleme Europas auch die Probleme der Welt sind. Aber die Probleme der Welt sind nicht Europas Probleme. This quote from the Indian foreign minister is included in this year's Munich Security Report. And he has a point. It wouldn't be Europe's problem alone if the law of the strong were to assert itself in international relations. However, to be credible as a European or North American in Jakarta, New Delhi, Pretoria, Santiago de Chile, Brasilia, or Singapore, and to achieve something, it's not enough to emphasize our shared values. We have to generally address the interests and concerns of these countries as the basic prerequisite for joint action. And that's why it was so important to me to not merely have representatives of Asia, Africa, and Latin America at the negotiating table during the G7 summit last June. I really wanted to work with these regions to find solutions to the main challenges they face: growing poverty and hunger, partly as a consequence of Russia's war, as well as the impact of climate change or the COVID-19 pandemic. And that brings me to my seventh and final point. If the multipolar world of the 21st century is to have an order which is based on justice and penalizes injustices, then we need new forms of international solidarity and new ways of enabling countries to have their say. The Munich Security Conference has also recognized this, Mr. Heusken. It seeks an exchange of ideas with all countries which share our interest in a world where power is bound by rules, which is not revisionist. That's what I'm calling for, and it's what I'm working to achieve. And I'm glad that many of you are at my side. And now, I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chief International Anchor of CNN, Christiane Amanpour.
Thank you. Mr. Chancellor, this time last year, I had the privilege of sitting here with President Zelensky. The United States had told him, maybe you shouldn't leave your country because something might happen. But he came here anyway to say that our fight is your fight, as he did again. Many nations here, with the exception of the US and the UK, did not believe in the intelligence that Vladimir Putin would in fact invade. And then 3 days later it did. You heard President Zelensky just say this must be over this year. Do you share that belief that it can and must be?
I think this is really a very brutal war. It is the imperialistic approach of Russia to conquer the whole Ukraine still, or big parts of it. And he is doing this with very much furor, with a lot of brutal impact on the soil of the Ukraine. And many people suffer from that, dying men, women, children, and young and old people. And this is what we should know. So this is what we can do now facing the situation, and that is giving the best support we can. And this is why Germany enlarged constantly its capacity of support for the Ukraine. And we did so with the effect that now we can say that Germany is the biggest supplier also of weapons to Ukraine in continental Europe, and we will continue to be there.
Mm-hmm. But you in your speech said we have to be ready for the long haul. I mean, you must strategize, you must think amongst yourselves how long this could last. Do you have a target date?
I think it is wise to be prepared for a long war, and it is wise to give Putin the message that we are ready to stay all the time together with Ukraine and that we will constantly support the country. So it is not really a very good idea that in this conference or at this podium the two of us discuss the question when exactly, in which months this war will end. The really important decision we should take all together is saying that we are willing to do it as long as necessary and that we will do our best.
Do you believe that NATO, the allies will stay united? And do you believe that your people will stay behind you and behind this effort?
Yes. First, I'm absolutely sure that Putin never expected that there would be a that united Europe and that there would be a that united world. He never thought that the transatlantic partnership would work that good, but also he never thought that there would be so much support for Ukraine from many other countries all over the globe. And he never expected that there would be a majority of people voting in the General Assembly saying that this is a war of aggression that could not be accepted. And he never expected that even in the G20 meeting we had a very strict sentence about this war and the Russian aggression, and an absolutely clear sentence that nuclear weapons should not be used in this war. So the unity is someone he never expected, and it is our task but also our chance that we stick to it. I'm absolutely sure that we will. And looking at the situation in my country, I see that there is a broad support for the strategy and activities of the government. Yes, there are some, and we are a democratic country, that are not that sure whether it is really a good idea to do all these sanctions and to deploy all these many weapons to Ukraine. But even the big majority of those is in the end accepting that the government has to take a responsible decision and trust us in doing what we do. And even those who possibly sometimes think we should do something more really understand that it is very good that we stick together, that we never go alone, and that we just do it together with our friends and partners, and especially with the United States. And this is why I'm also sure that we will have the support of our people for the things we are having to do.
Obviously, one can't put a date on the end. However, it does depend, I suppose, on the amount of help that you send and the speed with which you send it. So no point in going over the length of time it took to get the Leopard tanks, and for you to say that, the sort of choreography between the UK, US, and Germany. But now you seem to be in the position of having to persuade all those other countries that were trying to get you to send the Leopards, or let their Leopards, to actually send them. Why?
Tja. There is a question I have to ask to others, especially those who were so much urging me to act in a special way. And I will just repeat, the only strategy for being united is never doing something just for your own, and to discuss with your friends and partners, and this is what we did. And I'm really appreciating very much the strong alliance with the United States in this case. It is very good that we did a lot, and not just the last step, together. And I'm sure we will continue to be together in this very difficult case.
When will they get there? When will the tanks get there, yours and the others?
So we are working, the Minister of Defense is here, he's working very hard to make it happen, and the industry is doing the same, so that we are able to deploy the first Leopard tanks very soon, and also with trained soldiers. This is what we already started. And we are doing so also in giving training and support for all the maintenance which is necessary, and munition to other parties that will join. And as I learned, many are not able to deliver the most modern tanks, which we do. I hope some more will join also in this case. But in the ones they are delivering, we will give the support as well. And as you know, there is also a big number of older tanks which we will deliver. And so this is all together what we can do. It's part of our joint activity, and I'm sure that in the end it has a concrete military effect. But the most important effect in this case is that Putin learns that it is a miscalculation if he thinks he can just stick to this course as long as necessary, and then we will stop our support. This will not happen.
Chancellor, there's also some worrying information or reality about your own and generally NATO's ammunition stockpiles. Secretary General said this week that what used to take 12 or so months to order and produce is now taking 28 months. Is that a worry? I mean, they are using a huge amount of shells, obviously, but how can you continue to prosecute this war if you're running out of ammunition and the production has not yet ramped up?
First, I discuss very often with Jens and also with Boris, the defense minister in Germany, and my foreign minister, Annalena, that we have to change the way of dealing with the industry. So in the last years, more and more, we thought that the relation between the public defense department and the industry is something very similar to a company that is buying a car. So there is always a stock of cars, there's a permanent production, there's always what you need for maintenance. The way we did it in the past, in the last 20 years or so, is that we once ordered and we agreed that the production is stopping because we have already bought what we need. So we have to understand that for our security, we have to change the way of dealing this fact. We need a permanent production of the most important weapons we are using, and this is also due to maintenance questions, and this is also due to the question of munition. And so this is what we are learning, but learning it means that we are now taking action in case of our own defense capabilities, but also doing it in supporting Ukraine. So you already may have heard that though this is a weapon that has not been used and produced for, I think, 20 or 30 years, we are now producing again the munition for the Gepard flak tank, which is very essential in defending Ukraine from missiles and other things, and it is something which we are starting so that there is a constant supply. We also discuss what we can do for achieving the chance that the munition that works with the tanks that are in use in Ukraine, mostly of Eastern and Russian origin, could also be continued. And there are a lot, and I see them, of our Eastern partners who could be very good partners in creating the production in this case. Okay. So we are willing to do our best that a permanent supply is feasible.
Part of this conference is also, as it was announced, to include the Global South and actually to try to change public opinion and opinion amongst the leadership. You were just in Brazil talking to President Lula. You asked for ammunition for the Gepard tank. I also interviewed him in Washington when he visited President Biden, and he said, no, not doing it. Don't believe in it. Don't believe in what you're doing. How are you going to convince the rest of the world to come on board with what you call a war for international and global values and the rule of law?
So first, I think that this is the last moment for what Putin always is calling the global West, to have a very good and much better relationship to many countries in Asia, Africa, and the South of America. I'm completely convinced that if we look from the world from the perspective of 2050, it will be a different world with many powerful nations in Asia, in Africa, and the South of America. And this is obviously Indonesia and India, if you look to Asia, but also our good friends we already have in Japan and in Korea, but look at Vietnam, look at Malaysia, look at the Philippines, look at Thailand. There are many countries that could be good partners for us if we are dealing with them, and this is what we should do. And this is the same with Africa. I just want to repeat that it's very good that we have a good relation with South African Republic, that we have a good discussion with Senegal as the leading country of the African Union today. But I would just remember you that Nigeria will have, as some people are telling us, 500 million inhabitants in the midst or near the midst of this century. And if we go to the South of America with Brazil, with Mexico, with many other countries there, they will be strong, and they will not accept that a country, even a country coming up now, will give them advice. This will be definitely a multipolar world. And the task we have today is to make very sure that this multipolar world is not a world which is not accepting the rule of law in the relation between countries, that revisionism is never accepted, which is what Putin is doing, and that we have, though we do not all agree on the way of governing our countries, agree that the habeas corpus, the integrity of a person, is something that is also accepted by those countries who are not democracies, like, for instance, Germany or France or UK or the United States. And this is the one thing we have to do. And this is why I invited many of them to this Elmau meeting in G7 in Germany. And this is why I think that we should not underestimate the situation. It was Brazil, it was South Africa, it was Argentina, it was Indonesia, it was India, and many others that made it feasible that we had that strong decision in G20 saying that this is an aggression and saying that nuclear bombs should not be used in this war. and we have them as partners, those who already decided on the General Assembly together with us, but also those who did not, haven't done this, but who are absolutely clear about the aggression. And just, you mentioned Brazil, Lula was and is absolutely clear, saying this is an imperialistic aggression by Russia and nothing else.
Yeah, but he also gives a little, he also says it takes two to tango, and he puts some of that blame on Zelensky. In any event, let's move on, because we're going to get some questions in a moment. But first, the tanks were like, no, 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 yes. Are the planes going to be no, 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 yes? And what are you going to talk to President Biden about when you go to Washington to meet him soon?
So we have a very good friendship, and it is not that we have public debates, but we have a lot of debates where we work on the questions on the table, and it is something that only works if we do not tell you before what we will do, and afterwards possibly also not all. So we have to do something and have to deal with some questions. And as you know, I think some questions before you asked me, you were deciding to send combat tanks. What? And now you have to convince others. But though you did this, you now ask me about another question which is not on the table, which is not on the agenda, where there's no need for discussing it. I think we will have to do a lot for making feasible that now a broad support for the things we already delivered for the battlefield on the ground, and which will be important, and we will continue to do more of what we already did and to get many countries joining us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chancellor. And apparently we don't have any time for questions. Sorry, but it's moving a little bit faster than I imagined, or slower. And President Macron's coming up next. Thank you.